Well, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're tuning in. My name's David Stradley. I'm producing artistic director of Delaware Shakespeare. For those of us tuning in on the East Coast, good evening. And for people tuning in from California today, good afternoon. We're so glad you're joining us for this second weekend of Delaware Shakespeare's mostly virtual festival. For tonight's event, Two Bald Guys Direct The Tempest. I'm very happy tonight to be joined by my friend, my colleague, my fellow bald guy, Mike Ryan, the artistic director of Santa Cruz Shakespeare.
Hey, David. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. So, Mike, this would have been the second weekend of our production of The Tempest. Would you guys have been in your run yet?
No. So Santa Cruz Shakespeare is a repertory company, and The Tempest was going to be the third offering of our rep. So I believe we were scheduled to start performances around, I want to say, August 4th, August 5th, and then enter the rep and run with the remainder of the shows until September. So we would have been approaching tech right now.
Aha. The fun part of the time.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, if you haven't guessed, both Mike and I were on deck to direct productions of The Tempest this summer, both of which had to get postponed due to COVID-19, and both of which we're hoping to produce in 2021. And tonight what we're going to do is just chat about our production plans. For those of you who have been tuning in to our mostly virtual festival, the point of this is that since we can't bring you a summer festival outdoors at Rockwood Park this year, we're trying to celebrate all those things that you love about seeing Shakespeare under the stars. And one of those things is the fun thing about live theater in general and Shakespeare in particular, which is seeing different interpretations that come from different artists and from different audiences. And that's certainly part of the fun we're hoping to figure out tonight is how each of us we're looking at doing this production. We just need to thank a few people. We'd like to thank Jansen's Market for being the lead sponsor of this mostly virtual festival. And we also like to thank our honorary producer, Laurel A. Regal. We also need to thank the Delaware Division of the Arts for its year-round support and some COVID-19 emergency funding we've received from the National Endowment of the Arts, Delaware Humanities, and the Delaware Community Foundation. And if you're enjoying the events in this mostly virtual festival, we invite you to make a donation at delshakes.org. And if you're watching from Santa Cruz Shakespeare and they want to support you guys, where would they make a donation, Mike?
SantaCruzShakespeare.org.
Yeah. All right, so again, tonight's event is called Two Bald Guys Direct The Tempest. And in many ways, this conversation is kind of inspired and dedicated to the Shakespeare Theater Association. Mike and I attend this conference in January every year, and we may have met before 2019, but that's the one I remember because it was in Prague. And at the final banquet, our spouses both joined us at the table we were at for this glorious banquet at the Lobkowitz Palace in the Prague Castle complex. It was pretty amazing.
Very amazing. And a huge shout out to Guy Roberts and Prague Shakespeare for making that happen.
Yeah. So Delawareans, Mike, are pretty proud of Delaware because it's a small state, so we feel like we have to be proud about it. But I will admit that Santa Cruz is probably a slightly more idyllic location for a summer Shakespeare festival, and definitely a more temperate location for a summer Shakespeare. What is the average temperature in a Santa Cruz summer?
Oh man, it's not very high. I want to say it's probably in the upper 70s, maybe on average.
That
maybe
sounds
77, 76.
We our typical summer day is 86, 87 degrees, and we frequently are in the mid to upper 90s.
Yeah, no. In fact, in the evenings in Santa Cruz, it gets pretty cold because the water temperature is about 54 degrees. So as the sun sets, the fog comes in and the air temperature really drops. And it's not uncommon in the middle of August to look out from the stage and see people in sleeping bags and down coats and hats and all kinds of stuff.
That is not something that we have at Delaware Shakespeare very often. And then when was the last time you had a production rained out?
Oh man, I was just thinking, we've not had one rain out since we've been Santa Cruz Shakespeare. So for the past 7 years, I think we have had one canceled because of lightning strikes, which we had to call because we were performing on a largely metal set. And I was a little worried for the actors. And we canceled one production because it did get really hot one day, up to about 104 degrees. We canceled a matinee production of Two Gentlemen of Verona one afternoon because of heat. But otherwise, we don't typically have to cancel because of weather.
So we had a Del Shakes fan jump into the comments here and say that one advantage we may have over Santa Cruz is that we could actually have an actual Tempest on stage during our production of the Tempest.
Absolutely. You might experience the real thing.
Yeah.
The other advantage you have over us in California is we have come close a couple of times to having to cancel performances because of air quality, because of smoke from wildfires. I know that, for those of you who know the Oregon Shakespeare Festival, they had to cancel a number of outdoor performances over the past 3 or 4 years due to air quality concerns. And we haven't quite hit that point yet, but we've come pretty close on a couple of occasions.
All right. Well, tonight's conversation is going to be pretty informal, as you might guess by the title. Two bald guys direct the Tempest. We're not going to dive into the depths of scholarly approaches here. And if you do have any questions, feel free to put those in the comment feed on the Del Shakes Facebook Live, and we'll work them into our conversation tonight. But basically, Mike and I are just going to be shooting the breeze, asking each other some questions about our productions. So I'm gonna get us kicked off here, Mike, and ask you. What made you decide to schedule the Tempest for 2020, and why did you want to direct it?
Yeah, it's interesting. This was not going to be my directorial debut by a long shot, but it was going to be my directorial debut for the Shakespeare Festival. So I'd been, waiting for an opportunity to direct something that I thought I felt like I understood in a really intrinsic way, and The Tempest is one of those plays that I feel like I get in a way that's deeply meaningful to me, and in a way that I think is important to share with other people. And and the other thing that's probably worth saying is that we run Shakespeare festivals, so our the body of work we're choosing from is limited, and a lot of that too depends on time since the last production of this particular play. And I believe the last time Tempest was produced here in Santa Cruz was back in 2007. So it'd been 13 years. It seemed like it was time. And as I'm sure you do, I think the play has a lot to say about our world, where we are, maybe some of the things we might need as we look towards a future in this country and in the world. I would turn that question kind of right back on you and ask what about the Tempest really speaks to you?
Yeah. For me, it's just always been my favorite Shakespeare play. And I think the quick answer, I think when I was growing up, I probably would have said, oh, it's because of the magic. I always love when there's magic in Shakespeare, whether it's Midsummer or Winter's Tale. But as I've grown older and matured, I think it's twofold. It's one, the idea of giving up control that Prospero finally does at the end of the play, and the theme of forgiveness. I just feel like that. Again, where we are as a society right now, and in general, in any time where we have themes of forgiveness and reconciliation, it's one I like to lean into. And we're different. So Delaware Shakespeare only produces one play each summer. You guys do 3. Normally 2 Shakespeare, 1 non-Shakespeare.
That's correct. Yeah.
So this would have been our 18th summer producing Shakespeare. So we had never done the Tempest.
Oh wow.
And I had. I said, it's my favorite, and I've been running the company for 8 years now. And I kept being like, I want to wait till the company gets to the place where I know we can do a really good, production of this play. It's my favorite. I don't know if I'll ever get to do it again. I want to make sure I can do it right. And about a year or so ago, I was like, what kind of measurement is that? How are you going to know when you're going to quit? Who knows how much longer you have the energy to run this company? And if it's your favorite play, do it.
Yeah. Do you know what's interesting about that too is I think that one of the pitfalls I often see with productions of The Tempest is that they can be overproduced.
Mhm.
That there's an interest in obviously the magic of it and the sound of it and all of those things, but particularly the idea of these spirits and magic that can often strangely lead directors and productions away from the text.
Yeah.
And I think that, as always in theater, we discover some of our greatest ideas in limitation, right? That limitation is the crucible of creativity. So some of the best productions of The Tempest I've ever seen have been pretty bare bones. And in fact, our production was going to be fairly bare bones production as well.
Yeah, our the actor who we cast as Prospero is named Jolie Garrett, and at our audition, he was talking about when he'd seen a production of this play when he was growing up, and it was formative, and he talked about there's all this smoke and special effects, and I was like, our production probably won't be like that. So
yeah.
But yeah, so let's dive into the magic, because you're right. I think that's one of the things that any production of The Tempest has to figure out. How are you gonna because we certainly have had productions recently, Aaron Posner's production with Teller from Penn and Teller, really dove into the magic. So how are you thinking about the magic elements in this play?
It's such a central question to this play, and I think it's one of the first questions you have to wrestle with as a director is what is Prospero's magic? What is that about? And so, as always, when I'm trying to tackle these things with the Shakespeare play, I just keep trying to go back to the text and figure out what's there. And there are a few things that I find really interesting about the magic in this play. One is that it seems to be largely illusory, meaning for example, the very tempest at the start of the play that splits the ship and causes the shipwreck. We later learn the ship is perfectly fine and sitting in a harbor with all the sailors unharmed. So there's a quality of illusion to it, which I think is interesting. The other thing I think is really interesting about the magic in the play is that Prospero gives it up at the end. And so I think one of the questions that I wanted to answer was, why does Prospero have to give up his magic? In other words, if he's a sorcerer or a wizard or whatever you want to call him, a magician, and he's got a staff and a book and a mantle and all of these things that give him these powers, why not just take them back to Milan and continue to rule there with all his newfound tricks and trappings? And so to me, the magic of the play is also linked to his, or in our production's case, her, because we were casting a woman to play Prospero, her desire for revenge and her anger over her past. So I think that there's something in the magic that is linked to that need for vengeance, that sort of power that comes from desiring revenge. And you had mentioned earlier this sort of need to give up control that I think Prospero ultimately arrives at, and this sort of need to let go of magic is to me closely linked to her decision to give up on her anger or her plans for revenge, as she at least had initially conceived them. The other thing I'll say about the magic is, to me, it seems very connected to the island itself, which, as Caliban tells us, is full of noises. So for our production, the focus of the magic in the world of the play was going to be through sound and music, specifically through a cappella song as sung by characters and actors in the play. How about you? What's your thinking about the magic here?
Yeah, same with, similar, started going, okay, what is magic actually a metaphor here for? What does it mean in the context of the play? And for me, the kind of central question or questions of the play is, what do we do when we have been wronged? And what do we do when we have wronged someone else? And I think what we want the answer to be is magic. We've been wrong. We want to snap the finger and have the wrongs go away. And the same thing when we've done wrong, we want to be like, I didn't do that. Let me take that back. So I didn't do that. Uh, but ultimately, that magic isn't going to be the thing that gets you there, that allows you to move forward. And I think what the real magic of the play is when Prospero decides to engage in a human level with the people around him. So we started thinking about what if the magic is more human based, on a human scale. One of the challenges of being an outdoor summer theater is that you don't have a blackout until about halfway
Right.
play. It's like you can't do that opening storm scene with special effects and things like it just doesn't show up.
Absolutely.
So we were thinking about how can this magic really be driven on a human scale. So we were actually we cast a really lovely actor as Ariel, and then we have normally have 5 college apprentices in our company. And the Tempest, as you know, is actually a pretty small cast play for Shakespeare. So there weren't actually going to be a lot of roles for the apprentices to play. And I was like, what we could use them for is they could be this like chorus of spirits. So Ariel was going to have, basically a spirit ensemble of people that, of spirits that would help enact this magic through just very human means. When the magic banquet appears, just these spirits were going to just, carry them out, and they were going to appear. So it was going to be very, very, human based. And then also, I'll pull this up because at our first design meeting, I said, "What is magic?" And I said, "Magic is things that glow." So
I love it.
we were gonna have a very bare stage, but then they were gonna be 3 what just looked like cubes, rehearsal cubes that you would have in any kind of rehearsal room, that would just look plain. But then at key moments, they would, at the magic moments, they would light up.
Yeah, it's cool.
But it would again be very, very human scale driven. It'd be an actor with one of those cubes, one of those balls, and helping to craft the magic there.
Yeah, it's so interesting. One of the things that we talked a lot about was actors. There's something also about this play to me that is very meta-theatrical. That Prospero in his speech talks about spirits and actors, and I think that there's something to me about this story being told, about being bald, being bald about the fact that it is a story told by actors, right? That it is that this ensemble of people have come together to tell a tale of revenge and a pathway through revenge towards forgiveness. And so one of the ways that I had conceived the staging of the play is that everyone functions both as an actor telling the story and as the character that actor plays, right? That there's a very defining costume element, for example, that is put on when the actor or spirit steps into the center of the space to take on a role, but that everyone is present in telling the story throughout, whether it's as an agent of the magic that's taking place, or as part of the island, or as one of the spirits that's inflicting torment or pleasure on whoever it may be.
Well, this is actually where I was going to go next, but somebody online asked this, which was if we could each talk about how our the physical playing spaces that we each operate in, how that impacts. So I think if you want to talk maybe about what your physical space is like there at Santa Cruz, and then how you were going to be using that.
Yeah, sure. So for those of you who have not been to the Grove, the Audrey Stanley Grove in Santa Cruz, California, we're up high on a bluff overlooking the Pacific, the Monterey Bay particularly. It's a very beautiful spot, and the stage faces away from the ocean. So if you're in the audience, as you look at the stage, the sky and the ocean are beyond. And consequently, one of the things that I'm very fond of doing there is not having a big giant back wall when I can avoid it, or at least if I do have a back wall, putting a hole in it or something that allows us to kind of see through through the space. We have an existing stage structure, 30 feet by 60 feet. It's just essentially a very well-engineered redwood deck. And then we build a set on top of it every year. And the challenge that we give to our scenic designer, we hire a single scenic designer for all 3 plays because it's easier to coordinate through one person and have 3 designers duking it out for what needs to happen. The challenge we give to the designer every year is to design a set that works for all 3 plays, that can change a bit from play to play so that we feel like there is some difference if I come to a matinee and then show up again for the evening, but that change can be accomplished by 5 people in the span of an hour and a half, right? So those changes are not overly significant, although I'm always blown away with the creativity that designers come up with for ways to make the space look totally different with just the smallest gestures. I can actually share a white model of the set. This is designed by a fantastic scenic designer named Deepu Gupta out of Bellingham, Washington. And here, I'll talk about it while I put it up here. I believe this is going to be labeled for 12th night. But you can see that there are elements, both 12th Night and Tempest obviously deal a lot with the sea or the seaside, a lot of watery elements and things like that. And so he created these beautiful wave-like panels, and they gradually sort of reduce in height as they work their way around the stage, almost evoking a kind of nautilus or shell type shape as they go. That giant doorway would be there for 12th night, obviously. We don't have a lot of tangoing in the Tempest.
Who knows?
You never know, right? But actually the Tempest of all 3 of the sets was going to be the most basic in terms of just utilizing that nautilus shape, the circular space in the middle, and perhaps another smaller circular platform from which Prospero could observe events. But I was looking primarily for as open a space as possible because I want to do so much of the storytelling with actors' bodies in space.
Yeah. Great.
Let me stop sharing this here. There you go.
And having had the opportunity to visit you all last summer, I could very much imagine that those trees rising out from behind those waveforms there. Yeah.
Now, tell me a little bit about you guys. You're in a park.
Yeah. So we're a lot different because we perform on the lovely grounds of a county park in North Wilmington. I'm just going to pull up an image here of this is from our production in 2017 of Henry V. And I like to say that we have a green box theater.
I love it.
We just have a open lawn with trees on 3 sides and this mansion towards the end of it. So every year, our design team says, okay, what alignment do we want the stage to have this year? And you can see our audience brings their own chairs, so we don't have a fixed auditorium like you guys have. So we can always rearrange the arrangement of the set each year. And a couple of years ago, we did In the Round for the first time, and our audience just loved it. They loved being so close. They loved the sense of community. And when I was thinking about the Tempest, I was like, well, it's on an island. It seems like a great reason to do something in the round with that, so that the audience literally becomes the ocean that keeps Prospero on this land. And part of the kind of driving influence for that was just I love the idea that the end for Prospero's final epilogue, that literally it's the audience that is keeping him there. When he asks for freedom from the audience, that he's literally in the middle of an island surrounded by people and has to ask their permission to be able to leave, and just to make that literal with staging it in the round. And I started thinking about just what's important about this island. And you talked about Caliban saying, "Oh, it's full of noises," and And I went to that speech too, not necessarily the noises, but the fact that there is this, even though Caliban is kind of has this torturous relationship with the island because of his relationship with Prospero, there's this strange beauty to how he describes that music, and to how people engage with this space. And we wanted to try to create a space that allowed for that reflection and that separating yourself from your day-to-day existence, and having that, that ability to kind of step back and go, oh, my life could be different. So we wanted to try to create a kind of strange island space that one could go to reflect. And the Delaware Art Museum had this really lovely exhibit late last year called Relational Undercurrents. That was artwork from the Caribbean. And I saw this great series. He's kind of a performance-based installation artist. His name is Fermin Ceballos. And he found this kind of island outcropping, and his performance piece was to go out there, build this brick structure build them into that, spend the night in that, then break out of it and swim back to shore.
Oh, wow.
And there was something about this very natural space with this very false human construct on it that seemed very appropriate for the Tempest. And so then, as I think much of us start to do now, we just start Googling phrases that might apply. And one of the phrases I searched for was something like boxes in nature. And I found this bizarre, basically observation point built on top of this mountain structure.
That's kind of terrifying.
Yeah. So our set designer, who's our technical director, his first time set designing with us, we just started thinking about what if we just had a square platform that is very unnatural in the middle of this very natural space. And we didn't quite get to the point of having a fancy white model. What we did was we played with blocks. And I'm going to share now, one night when I was working in my on my kitchen table with our various platforms.
That's cool.
Basically, we have is two ramps, that will intersect, and then a circular platform on top of those two ramps. So we have this world where there is this dynamic sense of that things could go one way or the other, and then this magic form on top of that we go to for contemplation. So that's kind of how we're thinking about the physical production. But I think it's very similar, that they both look like they both can be very minimalistic, and depending on the imagination of our audiences and the physicality of our actors to create the magic.
Yeah, so like you say, so much of it depends on what that island is. My temptation with it is always to think of it less as a rock in the middle of the ocean somewhere, and more as almost like a prison that Prospero has crafted from her own anger, right? That that she's trapped in this place as much by her own emotions and past as it is a physical, location.
Yeah. So you already talked. You said that you've cast a female actor as Prospero. Do you want to talk about what I know as a company that you all look for opportunities to cast women in traditionally male roles and to have them perform as their gender rather than a female actor playing a male character?
Yeah. So one of the policies I put into place 6 years ago at the festival was to cast an even number of men and women in the company. And as a part of that, obviously then the question arises about whether or not you have women playing roles as men or not, or playing them as women. And to me, what's more interesting is to see roles regendered than having people construct a gender that they may or may not own. So historically, we have for the past 6 years mostly regendered the work as we've tackled it, and we've done that in a variety of ways. We've done it with everything from a female Hamlet, a female Leonato, and Much Ado. Tempest is obviously very interesting because there is only one role written as female in the play, and that's Miranda. So to tell the story with a gender equitable company is interesting, but it does what I find that it often does with these plays when we start to tackle the work that way, which is opens up new interesting ways of telling the story. So one of the things we did was decide to offer the role of Prospero to a wonderful actor, Laura Gordon. She's also a terrific director, but wonderful actor out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And then we also regendered some other things. We made them sisters, Antonio and Prospero, rather than having the overthrow be about gender or about a male snatching the throne from a female. We wanted to sort of keep that gender balance in place for the siblings. Ariel is often regendered to female, and that was a very easy decision for us to make as well as we looked at equity for this. And then Trinculo is another role that we're very blessed to have a wonderful company member here who's such an amazing clown. Her name is Patty Gallagher, and so that seemed like a no-brainer to me, is allowing her to play Trinculo as the amazing female clown that she is. So those are a few of the roles specifically that we decided to regender for the story. How about you? Do you do any regendering of things as you work?
We do. One quick question from somebody on Facebook. They want to know, when Santa Cruz regenders the roles, do you change the pronouns in the text?
We usually do. We're not actually right now in the War of the Roses. We're doing this online reading of the Henry VI plays, and we decided for purposes, because we're telling that story with 10 actors, and we're doing it over 4 plays, and it was just going to be too much of an undertaking to think about pronouns for all of that. But yes, typically we do change pronouns in the text, just so it doesn't keep pulling you out of the play if you hear somebody saying he, and you're looking at someone who's very obviously not identifying as he.
Yeah. So also, so we don't on our summer show, we don't necessarily have as clear of a specific policy as you all do, but we do a summer production, then we do a community tour in the fall, mm-hmm. where we take a production on the road and travel into homeless shelters and prisons and community centers, and we do those with 8 actors. And for that one, we have been very clear that we're going to be at least 50-50 gender parity, although I know that's a binary statement there.
Right.
And that has been so exciting that we've been moving more in that direction with our summer festival. And we always kind of look for, okay, what are roles that we could use female or non-binary performers in? And it's sometimes we change the gender, sometimes we don't. When we did Henry V, we cast a really wonderful female actor as Henry, but just kept it. She just played the role as a man, because it seemed like it was going to change a whole lot in the play if we switched that. But for the Tempest, we have a Queen Alonza, so and we're changing the gender there. Ariel as well, we've cast with a female actor, and for us, Stefano of the Clowns is. And we're kind of I'm in the discussion right now with that actor, whether it's a he, whether it's a she, whether they, with that.
Yeah, I mean, one of the great things about it, I have found after doing it for 6 years, is that things reach your ear in a different way. Particularly, it's so interesting, particularly too with Shakespeare's a little bit like Walt Disney in the sense that the mothers are sort of strangely absent, and there's a lot of father-daughter relationships that get very complicated and sometimes violent, and certainly verbally abusive often. And I think we've gotten so used to them that when they happen in a Shakespeare play, we think, oh, that's terrible or whatever else, but it doesn't really like hit us because we're expecting Leonardo to heap abuse on Hero after she's accused of sleeping around before her wedding day, right? What I find fascinating is if you change the role to a woman and it's suddenly a mother, that you to hear a mother curse out her daughter in that way makes it land as if you're hearing it for the first time, which is pretty wild and pretty great. And I think one of the things I'm really looking forward to exploring in this Tempest too is how that relationship between Prospero and Miranda changes, what it does to the story if they're a mother and a daughter rather than a father and a daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, so we when we auditioned, we auditioned to find our Prospero first, and then we kind of started working to see how we want to do the rest of the cast. And we auditioned women for the role, and a lot of actors of color, and ended up casting a male actor of color as Prospero. And again, part of the reason I think is this. Looking at what the core conflict of the play is, and it's someone who has everything taken away from them, and then gets to a place at the end where they're able to forgive and move forward. And I just found myself saying, what are the highest stakes there, to have, and thinking of to have a white male get things taken away, and then having the privilege of forgiving at the end. It seemed like it added higher stakes to the story, considering a female Prospero or a person of color as Prospero. And sometimes when we, as frequently happens in Shakespeare, sometimes you just have kind of imaginary families where the father is Black and the daughter is white and the mother is Asian. And we made a decision this year to have the family just be a biological family. So we have a really wonderful Black actress playing Miranda. Antonio is a Black actor. And particularly and this wasn't part of the plan to have this reckoning with Black Lives Matter happening, but I'm anticipating that the casting choices we have made are going to resonate in a different way now than they would have resonated, 3 or 4 months ago.
Absolutely. One of I consider him to be a core company member here, a wonderful actor named Alan Gilmore, talks a lot about the sort of list of Shakespeare roles that actors of color have been allowed to play, right? There's this sort of Shakespeare festivals claim to have been having diversity of casting for a long period of time, but it's actually channeled through a pretty narrow sort of focus of characters. It's always, for example, Banquo or Duncan, but not Macbeth. It's, Caliban, but not Prospero. It's, Mercutio, but not Romeo. It's the sort of those kinds of ways that we limit involvement in the plays. So it's really great. I think it's and just as with a woman playing the role, I think anytime we open up roles to the diversity of our community, we hear them in brand new ways, right? And that's always really thrilling and exciting. And it's the reason why we can keep doing these plays over and over and over and over again, and always have them be fresh and interesting and new and strike us at different points of our lives with different meaning.
So our actor who's playing Caliban is actually watching right now and has put a question on Facebook, and he asked, and I think kind of this transitions right where we are, but he asked, how do you approach some of the more traditionally controversial aspects, depictions that ring out from the Tempest? And I think particularly things like how Caliban's appearance is described and how Caliban is referenced in the play as a slave and so I guess let's just how are you guys thinking of Caliban?
Well, it's interesting, there's a lot of confusing language about Caliban in the text, but I think, at the end of the day, he has a human shape. So I think of him as a human being rather than as some sort of a monster or a homunculus or other creature. One of the things that I'm going to be a little careful answering this question because one of the joys of working on a play is unlocking this with the actor who's playing Caliban. And Jonathan Smoots, who is scheduled to come and play Caliban for us this summer, and I have just had one conversation. And it was a good one. And I can tell you some of the things we were talking about. I have no idea if they'll make their way into the production next summer or not. But for us, we think of him, or we have started to think of him, as a human being, and the misshapenness of his that is spoken of in the play. One of the things that we're interested in exploring is whether or not, when the attempted rape of Miranda happened, if Prospero didn't in fact inflict some sort of physical violence on Caliban that resulted in him being broken in some way, shape, or form. And that those references to his missapenness, obviously Shakespeare means that in a lot of ways, and there's certainly some psychological missapenness to Caliban, but that the physical missapenness of Caliban might have come from that actual altercation during the attempted rape. So those are some of the ideas that we started exploring, but we haven't settled on anything just yet. How about you?
Yeah, well, I'll kind of back up to one, then we'll get specific into Caliban. But one of the controversies of this play is its relationship to colonialism, because you can look at this play as as about a colonialistic force. Prospero comes onto this island and it's not his, and claims it. I certainly understand that that interpretation of it. But for me, as I was really diving into it, it's like, that's just not something that right now that I feel like I'm interested in exploring. That to me, it's these questions of freedom and liberty and forgiveness and revenge. And again, another shout out to Shakespeare Theater Association. Last year when we were in Dallas, I was having dinner with Madeline Sayet, who's a very talented Native American director. And if our thing is two bald guys direct the Tempest, my dinner prompt for her is why do you hate the Tempest? And she goes, well, I don't hate it. But I said this very thing to her about, I understand that there is this colonialistic interpretation, but that's just I'm not interested in exploring that. And she called me on it. She says, that's your privilege to be able to look at this play and not see it about colonialism. If you are someone that has been directly impacted by colonialism, you cannot look at this play and not see the colonialism in it. And that it's like, that is true.
Yeah.
So really, I'm now in trying to figure out, okay, if the play is a question about what do you do when you've done wrong, what do you do when you've been wronged, well, then that certainly actually directly applies to colonialism and those issues. And then, Caliban is really the role, I think, where you have to figure out what your relationship is to that question of colonialism and the other and that. And for me, there's a line at the very end when Prospero comes to terms with Caliban, and he says, this thing of darkness, I do acknowledge mine. And for me right now, what's been guiding the kind of Prospero-Caliban relationship is that Caliban is what Prospero could become if he isn't able to deal with the hatred and revenge that he has in them, and that there is a relationship there between Prospero and Caliban. So Newton is a really great Black actor, and when we had the audition for this, I was like, do you have any concerns about a Black actor playing the role of Caliban? And I think part of the issue where you get into that is if Caliban becomes the only Black actor in the production, sure. Well, that's certainly saying something. So yeah, the joy is that Shakespeare's hard, Shakespeare's controversial, and you don't know how you're going to do it before you get into it. But you go into it with a open heart and clear communication with your actors and your collaborators, and try to discover something that's going to be enlightening to an audience.
Yeah, I do think there's a lot to be said, though, for just to take something you said a step further, which is the idea that we're all of us poisoned by our hatred, whether we're the ones in control or in the position of power or not. Whether we're talking about white supremacy, or we're talking about sexism, or we're talking about colonialism. That I think one of the really interesting things that does track through this play is how everyone suffers from that. Not to say that some people don't have places of privilege in this, or end up in much better places than others, but I think one of the things that's great about the Tempest is that everyone is damaged by Prospero's thirst for revenge somehow in this play, which is interesting.
Yeah. Yes, I think both of us always hope that our productions connect and resonate with the world. We wouldn't be doing these if we thought they were just 400-year-old museum pieces. And you certainly already started talking about some of that. But what are ways that for you, right, the Tempest is resonating with today's world, and how is that shaping how you think about what you might be doing next summer?
Yeah, it's so interesting. The political conversation in this country has become so divisive and so fueled by anger, and it just seems to be getting worse and worse and worse. And so, to me, one of my hopes for this play, for the work that we'll get to the privilege of enjoying and engaging within this play, is trying to figure out how you move past that, right? How you let go of anger and revenge and the past, and start to look to the future. I think that I'll say just very generally in terms of our national climate, and then of course there's always the personal answer too. I'm at my sister's house right now, and she just had a baby in January. And plays hit you at different points in your life in different ways too. And I think one of the beautiful things too about this play is that Prospero moves from thinking about the events of her past that have defined her place in the world to thinking about the future through the form of her daughter and the love that's blossoming between Miranda and Ferdinand. And that's certainly something that's resonating a lot with me right now, as I'm starting to see the world through the eyes of a new person who will live in it way, way beyond when I do. And that changes your priorities in pretty profound and fundamental ways. How about for you?
Well, so, for me, the most transformative and enriching work that I've done in the last 4 years has been taking Shakespeare into Department of Corrections facilities in Delaware. And so, as a company and as artists who worked with our company, we've just been giving a lot of emotional thought to these questions of freedom and liberty and justice and crime. And we were actually, the plan this spring leading up to the Tempest was we were going to do a series of conversation circles on the Tempest and restorative justice. And I'll give a shout out to next Friday, as part of the Mostly Virtual Festival. We have a pre-recorded video that will be premiering on that topic of the Tempest and restorative justice. And we recorded that earlier this week, and I wanted to leave that conversation and just go right into the rehearsal room, because there was just so much that these restorative justice practitioners were talking about that, just was right in the play. So certainly what I'm learning at restorative justice, it's not looking at just about, okay, how do you punish a crime? It's how do you move forward as individuals, as a society, when a wrong has been done. That is certainly society-wide what we are all talking with and wrestling with right now when we look at the original sin of our country of slavery, and just was it ever addressed? How can we move forward in such a way? So I'm hoping that will resonate, but then just the personal dimension of that as well. Just how, if you have something that you've been done wrong, or if you've done wrong to somebody else, again, how do you step forward? and so much of that is in Tempest, it seems to be this issue of control. I mean, that's the other thing that the magic seems to be for me in this play, is a metaphor for control. And what does giving up of control mean?
Yeah.
I didn't even think about this before, but and we were talking about kind of dismantling white supremacy and kind of stepping back and centering other voices. I mean, one could also argue that's part of what, although actually Prospero goes back into power at the end, but still he gives up his power to enter into a more human relationship with people around him.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. It's one of the, I think the fascinating thing about Shakespeare, one of the fascinating things about Shakespeare to me, is how his plays, as they move on, seem to feel less overwritten, and actually in some ways seem to almost become underwritten. There's a quality when I read The Tempest that makes me wonder why certain scenes aren't there, or why he doesn't elaborate on certain things, or why he doesn't go down this particular thing, this particular rabbit hole. And I think the genius of Shakespeare in his later work, especially, is that slightly underwritten quality allows for such depth of interpretation and depth of exploration, and I'm excited to dig into it.
Cool. Total geeky Shakespeare question. We were kind of diving into the depths of what it means to be a human being right now, but just on a total geeky Shakespeare question, the mask towards the end of Ceres, Iris, and Juno, these three spirits that they come down to give this kind of pre-wedding celebration to Ferdinand and Miranda. What are you guys? Are you keeping that? Are you ditching it? Are you rewriting it?
I'm still wrestling with that. I mean, one of the great bad things about COVID is that I've got more time than ever to think about this play, right? I mean, usually it's such a race to the finish line from the time you decide to do it to the time you get to your first rehearsal that, it's pretty much all you can do, just kind of prep. And to have an extra year to kind of mull on these things is pretty great. I love the idea of it as an interlude. I'm less interested in it as a sort of admonishment towards chastity for Miranda. It has this sort of very strange place. I think I'll probably explore it as a musical interlude, since music is going to play such a profound role in our production, but maybe not quite as drawn out and speechified as Shakespeare's version is. How's that for a vague answer? How about you? Are you all in to do it?
I think we've cut the whole harvest dance part, the second part of it. But right now, yeah, the plan is to keep Ceres and Iris and Juno as this kind of Prospero's blessing on this relationship. And of course, part of the irony there is he goes from this lovely, what could be seen as a generous gesture, to then realizing that he's forgotten to punish all the people that have revenged him. I'll also say that one of the other reasons why we're keeping it is because we call our high-end donor circle is called Prospero's Circle.
Oh.
And we have an aerial level and another level that's named after one of these spirits. I was like, we have to keep it so that people in this Prospero's Circle level know where this comes from in Shakespeare. So for all of our Prospero Circles members out there, we thank you so much for your very generous support of Delaware Shakespeare. And you can know that when you see that mask next year in The Tempest, that you're seeing your support at work there.
I love it. All
right. Well, we were kind of thinking we'd go 45 minutes. We're now 55. Do you have a last question you want to ask me, or vice versa?
I don't have a last question. I just want to say to all of you Del Shakes fans out there, how fortunate you are to have David at the helm of your theater company there, because this is going to be embarrassing for him, I'm sure. But over the past few years, as I've gotten to know David at STA, I'm just continually struck by his willingness to engage with not just the text of Shakespeare, but also its relevance to our modern world, and his open-mindedness to engage particularly with social justice issues and their relevance to this work. and you could be in a lot worse hands. So good on you.
Well, that's very kind of you, Mike. And I'll say thank you for employing Philadelphia area actors.
You bet, you bet. There's some of the best in the country.
Yeah, it was last one of the reasons I wanted to get out and visit Mike for a long time, because I just said I really admire what they have done out there. But last year, Lindsay Smiling, who just directed our fall production of Romeo and Juliet, was in your season. And what my wife Michelle really wanted to see was Pride and Prejudice, his role in that as Mr. Darcy. But you also used Karen Peaks and Ian Merrill Peaks, so there's a Philadelphia area contingent out there at Shakespeare, Santa Cruz Shakespeare.
Absolutely.
And also for any folks out there who are wanting to know how you raise money within how many months was it? From when you realized your company didn't exist to then building a brand new space?
Oh, wow. Well, yeah, we had two huge fundraisers. Like first, when the festival was closed by the university, because it was initially called Shakespeare Santa Cruz and it was run by UCSC. They canceled it at the end of the summer, and between, I guess, September and February of the following year, we raised $1.1 million from our community to relaunch the festival as an independent entity. And that's kudos to them, to the community, for just wanting it so badly. And then 2 years later, we lost our space. And so we had to build a brand new one, which we did in 90 days, again, with the help of the community, which was extraordinary.
Yeah, so if there are any arts administrators out there wanting a masterclass in how you reinvent an organization on the fly, Mike Ryan is your.
All I can provide you with is a masterclass in the humility that comes with learning to appreciate the amazing people in a community who want to keep something alive and happening. So,
and I'll say one of my favorite things of being able to visit a Shakespeare theater, and the long-term vision that Mike and his team had, is that the space that you guys used to be in was surrounded by redwoods. And the new space you're in wasn't necessarily surrounded by redwoods, but you've planted redwoods in your very first year.
Over 200 now, I think we planted. So we're planting a veritable forest.
With the long-term vision that is going to keep growing and surround you. And we all need that long-term vision to get through this period we're in right now.
Absolutely.
So, well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time on your Friday to join us. And
my absolute pleasure, David. Thanks for having me.
Tempest. And people can hopefully tune in next summer to see which characters are bald in The Tempest.
All right. Take care. Have a great weekend.
Well, thanks, Mike. And thank you all for tuning in.